At exactly 6:30 p.m. on April 7, 2022, Officer Gladys Santiago picked up the phone at DeRidder Police Department. She had no idea the voice on the other end would lead her to one of the most analyzed confessions in Louisiana history. The caller said 5 words that would change 4 children's lives forever. "I shot my girlfriend. She's dead." 0 emotion, 0 urgency, 0 attempt to save her. Right now, the 911 call recording contains 47 specific statements that would later be used to convict Tyler Derochowski of second-degree murder. Investigators detected 8 distinct indicators in his voice patterns that forensic audio analysts would examine during the trial. The call lasted 11 minutes and 34 seconds. In that time, Tyler Derochowski provided police with a detailed account of exactly what he'd done, where the victim was, and where he'd be waiting for arrest. But here's what should concern you. In those 11 minutes, he never once asked if Ashley Fish could be saved. Think about that. Before we analyze every word of this call and what it reveals about criminal psychology and police procedures, if you want to understand how law enforcement handles these critical moments, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Because what we're about to break down will change how you understand 911 emergency response protocols. And drop a comment telling us, what do you think investigators should listen for in confession calls? Officer Gladys Santiago has been a 911 dispatcher for the DeRidder Police Department for several years. She's trained in emergency call protocols. She knows how to handle everything from medical emergencies to active shooter situations. But when the phone rang at 6:30 p.m. on that Thursday evening, nothing in her training could have prepared her for what she was about to hear. Let's break down this call second by second, because every moment matters in understanding how this case unfolded. The call begins with standard protocol. The dispatcher identifies herself and asks about the nature of the emergency. Tyler Derochowski responds, "I need to turn myself in. I just committed a crime." Now pause here. This opening statement is critical. Derochowski doesn't say there's been an accident. He doesn't say I need help. He doesn't say send an ambulance. He says, "I need to turn myself in." This is a calculated statement. It shows awareness of legal consequences. It shows understanding that what he did constitutes a crime. It shows that he's already thinking about the arrest process. Officer Santiago, following her training, asks what crime was committed. She needs to know what she's dealing with. Is this a theft? An assault? What kind of units does she need to dispatch? Derochowski responds, "I shot my girlfriend. I think she's dead." Again, let's pause. I think she's dead. Not, she might be hurt. Not, I don't know if she's okay. He thinks she's dead. Officer Santiago immediately asks if he needs medical assistance. This is critical protocol. Even if someone appears deceased, emergency medical services should be dispatched. There's always a possibility of life-saving intervention. Derochowski's response, no, just no. No request for an ambulance. No concern about whether Ashley might still be alive. No urgency about getting help to the scene. This single word, no, would become a crucial piece of evidence at trial, because it demonstrates that Derochowski was not concerned about Ashley's survival. He had already determined in his mind that she was gone, and he made no effort to get her help. Officer Santiago continues with her protocol. She needs the address. She needs to know where this happened so she can dispatch units. Derochowski provides the address, North Ridge Drive in DeRidder. While he's giving this information, Officer Santiago is already typing. She's entering the address into the dispatch system. She's preparing to send officers to the scene, but she doesn't hang up. Standard protocol is to keep the caller on the line. There are multiple reasons for this. First, it prevents the caller from fleeing. As long as Derochowski is talking to Officer Santiago, he's not running. He's not destroying evidence. He's not creating additional problems. Second, it allows the dispatcher to gather additional information. Every detail Derochowski provides could be crucial for the responding officers. They need to know what they're walking into. Third, it creates a recorded statement. Everything Derochowski says on this call is being recorded. It can be used as evidence, and in this case, it absolutely would be. Officer Santiago dispatches Officer Cameron Smith and Corporal Joshua Stanford to the North Ridge Drive address. Code 3, lights and sirens. This is an emergency response, but she keeps Derochowski on the line. She asks him where the weapon is. This is a critical safety question. When officers arrive at a scene where someone has been shot, they need to know if there's still an active threat. Is the weapon secured? Is it still loaded? Could there be additional violence? Derochowski tells her, "I left the gun at the house." Notice the phrasing. I left the gun. Past tense. He's no longer at the residence. He's somewhere else. He left the scene of the incident. This is another critical detail. Derochowski didn't stay with Ashley. He didn't try to help her. He left. He left her there and went somewhere else before calling 911. Officer Santiago asks him who the victim is. She needs identification for the investigation. Derochowski responds, "Ashley Fish, my girlfriend of 2 years." He provides her full name. He specifies the length of their relationship. He's being cooperative in terms of answering questions, but there's still no emotion in his voice. No distress, no remorse evident in the audio. Then Officer Santiago asks a question that reveals something crucial. She asks, "Is there anyone else involved?" This is standard protocol. In domestic situations, there could be other victims. There could be accomplices. There could be children in the home. Derochowski's response, "There are kids at the house that need someone with them." This statement is extraordinary for several reasons. First, it confirms that there were children present. Ashley's 4 daughters were in that house. Second, it shows that Derochowski was aware the children were there and that they were now alone. Third, it reveals that Derochowski left those children. He left them in a house with their mother, who he had just shot. He left them alone, knowing they would need help. This statement would be analyzed extensively during the trial because it shows consciousness of the situation. Derochowski wasn't in a blind panic. He was aware enough to know that children needed help, but he still left them there. Officer Santiago asks when this happened. She needs to establish a timeline. Derochowski responds, "About 10 minutes ago." 10 minutes. That means the shooting occurred at approximately 6:20 p.m. It's now 6:30 p.m. 10 minutes have passed. What did Derochowski do in those 10 minutes? According to his own statements on the call, he left the house. He traveled to another location. He had time to think about what he'd done. He had time to make decisions. And the decision he made was not to call for help immediately, not to try to save Ashley, but to leave, and then call 911 from a different location to turn himself in. Officer Santiago asks about Ashley's condition. Derochowski says, "She wasn't breathing when I left." Not breathing, but he left anyway. He didn't check for a pulse. He didn't attempt CPR. He didn't call for medical help. He saw that she wasn't breathing and he left. Officer Santiago asks for clarification. "Did you check on her?" Derochowski's response, "No, I didn't check on her, but I think she's dead." This is a remarkable admission. He's stating clearly that he did not verify her condition. He assumed she was deceased and acted on that assumption by leaving. At trial, the prosecution would argue that this demonstrates specific intent. Derochowski shot Ashley with the intent to end her life. He believed he had succeeded, and he left without attempting to render aid because he believed his goal had been accomplished. Officer Santiago continues gathering information. She asks where in the house Ashley is located. Derochowski responds, "She's in the bathroom. The bathroom door is locked." The bathroom. And the door is locked. This raises immediate questions. Did Derochowski lock the door after shooting Ashley? Was the door locked during the incident? Why was it secured? The prosecution would later argue that locking the door was another deliberate act. It prevented the children from immediately discovering their mother. It secured the scene. It was a conscious decision, not a panicked reaction. Officer Santiago asks about the weapon again. She needs to know the exact status for officer safety. Derochowski tells her, "I unloaded the clip. The gun is in the house. I unloaded the clip." This is perhaps one of the most significant statements in the entire call because it demonstrates extreme presence of mind. Think about the sequence of events Derochowski is describing. 1. He shot Ashley. 2. He determined she wasn't breathing. 3. He took the time to unload the weapon. 4. He locked the bathroom door. 5. He left the house. 6. He traveled to another location. 7. He called 911. Each of these is a separate, distinct action. Each requires conscious thought. Each requires decision-making. This is not the behavior of someone in a blind rage who acted impulsively and immediately regretted it. This is the behavior of someone who committed an act and then took deliberate steps afterward. The act of unloading the weapon is particularly significant. If you're in a state of panic after shooting someone, you don't typically think to remove the ammunition. You drop the gun, you run, you react emotionally. But Derochowski took the time to eject the magazine, to make the weapon safe. This shows technical knowledge of firearms. It shows calm enough to perform a task correctly. It shows awareness of safety protocols. All of this would be used at trial to demonstrate that Derochowski had specific intent, that he knew what he was doing, that he was in control of his actions. While Derochowski is still on the line with Officer Santiago, Corporal Stanford arrives at the Northridge Drive residence. Officer Santiago can hear the communication between the responding officers. She maintains the call with Derochowski, keeping him on the line until officers make contact with him. Derochowski has told her he's not at the house. So where is he? The recording doesn't specify his exact location, but he's close enough that officers are able to locate him quickly. Within minutes, Officer Smith makes contact with Derochowski. The 911 call ends as Derochowski is taken into custody. The entire call lasted 11 minutes and 34 seconds. In that time, Derochowski provided a complete confession. He admitted to shooting Ashley. He described the scene. He explained his actions afterward. He gave investigators everything they would need to build their case. But what the call doesn't contain is perhaps equally significant. There's no expression of remorse, no crying, no emotional breakdown, no statements like, "I didn't mean to," or "It was an accident," or "I don't know what happened." Forensic audio analysts would later examine the call for emotional indicators. They would analyze Derochowski's tone, his pace of speech, his choice of words. What they found was consistency. Derochowski's voice remained steady throughout the call. There were no indications of extreme emotional distress. He answered questions clearly and directly. He provided information without prompting. This emotional flatness would be noted by investigators. Because in cases of true accidental shootings or crimes of passion where the perpetrator immediately regrets their actions, you typically hear distress, you hear crying, you hear hyperventilating, you hear someone who is psychologically overwhelmed by what they've done. Derochowski exhibited none of these signs. Now, it's important to note that people respond to trauma and stress in different ways. The absence of emotional expression doesn't necessarily prove intent. Some people go into shock. Some people dissociate. Some people's stress response is to become very calm and methodical. However, when combined with Derochowski's actions, the lack of emotional distress became part of the overall picture that prosecutors would present at trial. Let's talk about what happened at the scene while this call was taking place. Corporal Stanford arrived at the Northridge Drive residence at approximately 6:35 p.m. That's about 5 minutes after Derochowski made the 911 call. Corporal Stanford approached the house. He would have been on high alert. He knows there's been a shooting. He knows there's a weapon in the house. He knows there are children present. The front door opens. Ashley's oldest daughter is there. Imagine being this officer in this moment. You're responding to a shooting. You're expecting chaos. And instead, a child opens the door. The daughter tells Corporal Stanford, "My mother is in the bedroom." She leads him to the location. This child, who has just experienced something no child should ever witness, has to be the one to show police where her mother is. Corporal Stanford enters the master bedroom. There's a bathroom attached. The door is locked, just as Derochowski said it would be. Corporal Stanford would have to determine how to gain entry. Does he force the door? Does he look for a key? Time is critical if there's any chance Ashley is still alive. He gains entry to the bathroom, and he finds Ashley Fish. She's in the location Derochowski described. She has sustained the injuries Derochowski described. Everything he said on the 911 call is corroborated by the scene. Corporal Stanford would immediately check for vital signs, for any indication of life, for any possibility that medical intervention could help. But Ashley has been deceased since the shooting, which occurred approximately 15 minutes earlier. There is nothing that can be done. Corporal Stanford secures the bathroom as a crime scene. He ensures the children in the house are safe and separated from the scene. He calls for additional units, for detectives, for the coroner, and he begins the process of documenting everything exactly as he found it. Meanwhile, Officer Smith has made contact with Tyler Derochowski at the location where he was waiting. Derochowski offers no resistance. He's cooperative. He's been expecting police. Officer Smith places Derochowski under arrest. He reads him his Miranda rights. He transports him to the police station for questioning. The 911 call has provided investigators with a roadmap, but now they need to understand the full picture. They need to know why this happened. They need to build a case that will hold up in court. Back at the scene, the investigation is just beginning. Crime scene technicians photograph everything. They document the bathroom, the weapon, the position of Ashley's body, every detail that might be relevant. They collect the weapon Derochowski mentioned. They verify that the magazine has been removed just as he stated. They collect the ammunition. They interview the children as gently as possible given the circumstances. What did they see? What did they hear? What can they tell investigators about what happened? They process the entire house looking for any additional evidence, text messages, phone records, anything that might explain what led to this moment, and they listened to that 911 call again and again, because every word Derochowski said is now evidence. Let's talk about how 911 calls are used in criminal trials. A 911 call is a powerful piece of evidence for several reasons. First, it's immediate. It's made in the moments right after an incident, before the caller has had time to construct a narrative or consult with an attorney. It captures their initial response, their initial explanation, their initial emotional state. Second, it's recorded. There's no dispute about what was said. The jury can listen to the actual words and the actual voice of the defendant. They can hear the tone, they can hear the pacing, they can make their own judgments about what it reveals. Third, it's often admissible even if the defendant later chooses not to testify. The defendant can't be forced to take the stand, but their own words from a 911 call can be played in court. In Derochowski's case, the 911 call would become a centerpiece of the prosecution's case. During the trial in March 2024, nearly 2 years after the incident, the jury would listen to this call in its entirety. They would hear Derochowski's voice. They would hear his calm tone. They would hear him provide details about what he'd done. They would hear him state that he hadn't checked on Ashley, that she wasn't breathing, that he thought she was dead. And they would have to decide, does this call, combined with all the other evidence, prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Tyler Derochowski had specific intent to take Ashley Fish's life? The defense would argue that the call doesn't necessarily prove intent. People in crisis don't always respond the way we expect. The absence of emotional expression doesn't mean absence of emotional experience. Derochowski might have been in shock. He might have been dissociating. His calm demeanor might have been a trauma response, not evidence of calculated behavior. But the prosecution would counter with the specifics: the unloaded weapon, the locked door, the decision to leave, the 10-minute gap between the incident and the call, the fact that he traveled to a different location before calling, the fact that he never asked about saving Ashley's life. All of these details, they would argue, paint a picture of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Officer Gladys Santiago would testify at the trial. She would explain 911 protocols. She would describe what she heard in Derochowski's voice. She would confirm that he never requested medical assistance for Ashley. The jury would have the transcript of the call. They could read along as they listened. They could review any portion they wanted during deliberations. And ultimately, they would find those 11 minutes and 34 seconds of recording to be damning evidence. Because when you listen to that call, you don't hear someone who accidentally hurt someone they loved. You don't hear someone desperately trying to save a life. You don't hear panic or remorse or confusion. You hear someone calmly reporting what they've done and waiting to face the consequences. Let's talk about what 911 dispatchers are trained to listen for. When Officer Santiago picked up that call, she would have been listening for several things simultaneously. First, the nature of the emergency. What happened? What kind of response is needed? Second, the location. Where did this happen? Where do units need to go? Third, immediate threats. Is there ongoing danger? Is the caller armed? Are there other victims? Fourth, the caller's mental state. Are they coherent? Are they a threat to themselves? Do they need medical attention? Fifth, evidence. Everything the caller says is potentially evidence, so the dispatcher needs to gather as much information as possible. Officer Santiago executed all of these tasks perfectly. She got the location, she dispatched units, she gathered information about the weapon, the victim, the children. She kept Derochowski on the line until officers could make contact, but she would also have been forming impressions. As someone trained to handle emergency calls, she would have noticed that this call was unusual. Most people who call 911 to report that they've hurt someone are in extreme distress. They're hyperventilating, they're crying, they're talking rapidly, they're asking for help, they're expressing regret. Derochowski exhibited none of these behaviors. This doesn't mean Officer Santiago made judgments during the call. Her job is to gather information and dispatch appropriate resources, not to determine guilt or innocence. But her observations would be relevant later. At trial, she could testify about what she heard, about what was present in the call and what was absent. Now let's discuss the legal significance of specific statements Derochowski made. When he said, "I shot my girlfriend," he admitted to the act. That's not in dispute. He acknowledged that he was the one who used the weapon. When he said, "I think she's dead," he acknowledged the result of his action. He believed Ashley had lost her life as a result of being shot. When he said, "I didn't check on her, but I think she's dead," he acknowledged that he made no attempt to verify her condition or to help her. When he said, "I unloaded the clip," He demonstrated that he had the presence of mind to perform a deliberate action after the shooting. When he said there are kids at the house that need someone with them, he acknowledged awareness of the children's situation and his decision to leave them. Every one of these statements would be analyzed at trial for what it reveals about Derochowski's state of mind and his intent. In Louisiana, to prove second-degree murder, the prosecution must prove specific intent. That means proving that the defendant consciously desired to bring about the victim's death or to inflict great bodily harm. The 911 call provides evidence of that specific intent in multiple ways. The fact that Derochowski shot Ashley demonstrates that he committed an act that he knew could cause her death. Firearms are inherently lethal weapons. Using one against another person shows understanding of potential consequences. The fact that he left without checking on her suggests that he believed his action had achieved its intended result. If he thought there was a chance she was still alive, why wouldn't he check? Why wouldn't he call for help immediately? The fact that he took time to unload the weapon suggests he was thinking clearly and making deliberate choices. This wasn't a crime where the perpetrator was so overwhelmed by emotion that they couldn't think straight. Derochowski was calm enough to remember to make the weapon safe. The fact that he waited 10 minutes before calling 911 suggests that saving Ashley's life was not his priority. If it had been, he would have called immediately from the house and requested emergency medical services. All of this, the prosecution would argue, demonstrates specific intent. The defense would challenge this interpretation. They would argue that the 911 call alone doesn't prove what was in Derochowski's mind at the moment he pulled the trigger. Maybe he acted impulsively in a moment of rage. Maybe he immediately regretted it but was in shock and didn't know what to do. Maybe his calm demeanor was a dissociative response to trauma, not evidence of calculated behavior. But when the jury deliberated, they would have to weigh all the evidence, and the 911 call was a significant piece of that evidence. There's another aspect of this call that's worth discussing: the impact on the children. Ashley's 4 daughters were in that house when this call was being made. They knew something terrible had happened to their mother. The oldest daughter had to be the one to open the door for police. She had to be the one to say, "My mother is in the bedroom." Can you imagine carrying that responsibility? Can you imagine being a child and having to be the one to guide police to where your mother is deceased? This is one of the many layers of trauma these children experienced. And it's a reminder of why domestic violence is so devastating. It doesn't just affect the direct victim. It affects children who witness it. It affects families who lose a loved one. It affects communities that have to grapple with this kind of violence. The 911 call is a piece of evidence in a legal case, but it's also a document of a moment when 4 children's lives changed forever. Let's talk about what happened after the call. Derochowski was transported to the Beauregard Parish Sheriff's Office for questioning. He had already provided a confession on the 911 call, but detectives needed more information. They needed to understand what happened in the 30 minutes between Ashley's last text message and the shooting. They needed to know if there was a specific trigger. They needed to understand the relationship dynamics. The details of Derochowski's formal interview haven't been fully released to the public. But we know that he didn't recant his confession. He didn't claim it was an accident. He didn't claim self-defense. He maintained that he had shot Ashley Fish, just as he stated on the 911 call. Based on that confession and the physical evidence at the scene, Derochowski was charged with second-degree murder. He was held without bond in the Vernon Parish Jail, as the Beauregard Parish Jail was closed at that time. The investigation continued for weeks. Detectives interviewed family members, neighbors, anyone who might have information about Ashley and Tyler's relationship. They pulled phone records. They analyzed text messages. They looked for any pattern of prior violence or conflict. What they found was absence of documentation. No prior police calls. No reports from neighbors. No documented history of physical violence. This made the case more challenging in some ways. Without a pattern of escalating abuse, it was harder to establish context for the shooting, but it also made it more tragic, because it suggested that April 7, 2022 might have been the first time Tyler Derochowski became physically violent with Ashley, and that first time was fatal. The case proceeded through the legal system. Pre-trial motions were filed. Evidence was exchanged through discovery. Both sides prepared for trial. And central to the prosecution's case was that 11-minute and 34-second 911 call. When the trial finally began in March 2024, almost 2 years after Ashley's death, the courtroom was packed. Ashley's family was there. Her mother, Sheila Krebsbach, the father of her children, Mr. Fish, other relatives and friends who wanted to see justice for Ashley. The jury was selected. Opening statements were delivered. And then the evidence began. One of the first witnesses was Officer Gladys Santiago. She took the stand and explained her role as a 911 dispatcher. She described receiving Derochowski's call. She walked the jury through what she heard and what she asked, and then the recording was played. The courtroom fell silent as the jury listened to Tyler Derochowski's voice. "I shot my girlfriend. I think she's dead. I didn't check on her, but I think she's dead. I unloaded the clip. There are kids at the house that need someone with them." Every word was heard by the jury. Every pause, every inflection, every detail. This is the power of a 911 recording. The jury doesn't have to rely on someone else's description of what was said. They can hear it themselves. They can form their own impressions. After the recording played, the prosecution asked Officer Santiago questions. Did Derochowski request medical assistance? No. Did he express concern about whether Ashley might still be alive? No. Did he ask for an ambulance to be sent? No. Did he show signs of emotional distress during the call? Officer Santiago testified that his voice was calm and steady. He answered questions directly. He didn't exhibit the kind of distress she typically hears in emergency calls. The defense cross-examined. They asked whether Officer Santiago is trained in psychology. Can she really determine someone's mental state from their voice? Isn't it possible that someone in shock might sound calm? Officer Santiago acknowledged that people respond to trauma differently. She wasn't making a psychological diagnosis. She was simply reporting what she heard, but the jury had heard it too. They could make their own determinations. The trial continued with other witnesses. Corporal Stanford testified about finding Ashley. Forensic experts testified about the weapon and the scene. Ashley's mother testified about her daughter's character. But that 911 call remained a cornerstone of the prosecution's case. In closing arguments, the prosecutor played excerpts from the call again. They emphasized Derochowski's own words. His admission that he shot Ashley. His statement that he didn't check on her. His acknowledgement that he left children alone in the house. His calm demeanor throughout. All of this, the prosecutor argued, demonstrated specific intent. Derochowski knew what he was doing. He intended the result, and he should be held accountable. The defense argued that the call showed someone in crisis who didn't know how to respond, someone who might have been in shock, someone whose actions afterward don't necessarily prove what was in his mind at the moment he pulled the trigger. But the jury deliberated and reached their verdict, guilty of second-degree murder. The 911 call had been persuasive evidence. Tyler Derochowski was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. That 11-minute and 34-second phone call had documented his confession, and it had helped secure his conviction. Today, that recording exists as part of the official record of this case. It can be requested through public records procedures. It's been referenced in court documents. It's part of the permanent documentation of what happened on April 7, 2022, and it serves as a reminder of several important things. First, anything you say on a 911 call can be used as evidence. The call is recorded, it's preserved, it can be played in court. Second, 911 dispatchers play a critical role in emergency response and in criminal investigations. Their training and professionalism can make a significant difference in outcomes. Third, these calls document moments of crisis that have lasting consequences. The people involved, the families affected, the communities impacted, all of their lives are changed by what happens in these moments. Officer Gladys Santiago did her job professionally on April 7, 2022. She followed her training. She gathered information. She dispatched units. She kept the caller on the line. She couldn't have known that the call she was handling would become central evidence in a murder trial. But that's the reality of 911 dispatching. Every call could be critical. Every detail could matter. Every word could become evidence. For Ashley Fish's family, that 911 call is a painful reminder of what happened. It's Tyler Derochowski's own voice admitting what he did. It's confirmation that he left Ashley without attempting to help her. It's documentation of the moment when 4 children lost their mother, but it's also evidence that justice was served, that Derochowski was held accountable, that the legal system worked as it should. The 911 call analysis reveals several critical elements about this case. It shows us the importance of emergency response protocols. It demonstrates how evidence is gathered and used in trials. It illustrates the role that a perpetrator's own words can play in securing a conviction. But more than anything, it reminds us of the human cost of domestic violence. Ashley Fish was making dinner for her children when her life was taken. She was coordinating with her ex-partner about parenting logistics. She was dealing with a situation that would escalate to violence in a matter of minutes. And then Tyler Derochowski made a choice. He made a choice to use a weapon. He made a choice to leave without getting help. He made a choice to call 911 and confess. Each of these choices had consequences. For Ashley, who lost her life. For her daughters, who lost their mother. For both families, who have to live with this tragedy. The 911 call documents those choices. It preserves them in Derochowski's own words, and it ensures that there's a permanent record of what happened on that April evening in DeRidder, Louisiana. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, please reach out for help. The National Domestic Violence Hotline operates 24/7 at 1-800-799-7233. You can also text START to 88788 or visit thehotline.org. These resources are confidential, they're free, and they can help you create a safety plan, understand your options, and connect with local services. Domestic violence doesn't always show warning signs. Sometimes the first incident of physical violence is also the fatal one. But there are resources available. There are people who can help. You don't have to face this alone. Ashley Fish's story is a tragedy, but it can also be a catalyst for awareness, for education, for prevention. If this analysis helped you understand how 911 calls are used in criminal investigations, please subscribe and turn on notifications. We're committed to providing educational content about the criminal justice system, emergency response protocols, and domestic violence awareness. Drop a comment with your thoughts. What did this 911 call reveal to you? What questions do you still have about how these cases are investigated? And please, share this video. Because awareness can save lives, education can prevent tragedies, and understanding how the system works can help us all make better choices when we see warning signs in relationships around us. Rest in peace, Ashley Fish. Your story matters, your life mattered, and the justice that was served in your name matters.